You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Horror Ramblings Podcast, the show about all things horror. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Horror Ramblings Podcast. It's that show you guys all love. Admit it, you do. You need to hit the like and subscribe button. Give us some 5-star reviews. You guys got this. I understand. It's busy, but all you gotta do is push a button. Show us some love. We love all our listeners out there. Just show us some love back, guys. That's all I'm asking. But as always, it's that guy Les. You know who I am. I don't really matter. I just kind of fill in the gaps when Steven says things because Steven's just so damn good at talking about news and everything. He's been podcasting a little bit longer than I have, and he's so damn good at it. I had to give you some props this morning, Steven. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. And now I'm feeling like I don't deserve all this praise, but I'm just.
You are good at what you do, man. I will say that right now.
Well, thank you. I try.
I'm gonna toot my own horn just for a second.
Please.
We had trick or treat, and I thought about sharing it on our Instagram page. I didn't. I shared it on my personal Twitter, and I saw that the page had liked it and everything. The silhouette of me is Freddy, enjoying some, trick-or-treat fun, waiting for the kids. I scared the bejesus out of several children, and I think my favorite one was this whole family come up, and they're walking up the road, and I'm standing there, and I hear them, is that a guy in a costume, or is that just a prop? Nah, that's just a Freddy statue. That's all that is. I should have let him get a little closer. My wife called it pre-scaring, which to me it sounds like some weird sexual, like ED or something.
Sure.
Like you can take a pill. You can take a pill to fix your pre-scaring. But I scared the shit out of this family. All of them. The youngest was crying. One of the oldest ones, I don't know if she was really pregnant or if it was just like part of her costume.
Mm-hmm.
But she ran from me for a moment, and then when I got close to her, she sat on the ground and said, "Please don't hurt me," which is not the correct way to deal with somebody chasing you.
But we've seen it in horror movies, so.
Yes. And the other one I thought was funny. I ran across the street. Our one neighbor has a fence, and I ran across the street, and the people were up against her fence, freaking out. One of them even knew who I was, like under the mask. They knew who I really was and everything, and we had a full-blown conversation, which would take all of the fear out of it for me.
Sure.
But after that, I chased them up the road, and they still ran from me. So, all in all, I'll say it was fun. We didn't have as many trick-or-treaters as I had hoped, but no, that's one thing I'm going to say. I think I'm pretty good at scaring people, and I'll give myself props. I think we had a lot of fun this year. My son even got a few good scares, which made him feel good, but we're going to go off and dress all cutesy as a family for trick-or-treat when we actually take the kids trick-or-treating, which I'm okay with. I mean, I can't wait till they get a little bit older and we can all dress as, zombies with flesh falling off and stuff. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, what you normally do.
Well, Oh, man. I know I have a few things I want to just touch on today, nothing major, but I was going to see if you had any crazy horror news that you wanted to bring up.
Well, whether or not it's crazy is debatable, but I do have some bits that I do want to talk about. One, I want to start with this one because this whole thing was kind of fun. Past week, I think it was, we had the Last Drive-In do their Halloween special, the Halloween special, and they showed, what was it, Demons 2 and All Hallows Eve. So I finally got to watch All Hallows Eve, or at least I had a reason to watch it, as opposed to just taking the initiative, which for some reason I just haven't. But they fixed it for me. So as I watched this, Darcy agrees with you. She said that she believes that Art the Clown will be a horror icon. She considers him a baby icon at the moment, but is on his way to becoming a true horror icon. So definitely agreed with you.
That makes me feel good.
And while we're on that subject, Terrifier 3 looks to be jumping into theaters on November 1st. So by the time this is out, it should be in theaters.
And I guess it's going to be it's actually going to take place on Christmas. It's going to be Art the Clown on Christmas.
Yes.
I guess they were teasing about that, which I actually really dig that concept.
Why not?
Because Art the Clown is one of those characters, like, he's a clown.
Mm-hmm.
Kids like clowns in horror movies, especially. They like clowns. And we've seen little instances where Art can actually make the kids like him a little bit. Perfect example, after the brutal bedroom scene in Terrifier 2. He's using the girl's head as the candy bowl, but the kids are getting a kick out of it.
Yep.
It's twisted, but it works. So I'm glad Darcy saw that.
Yeah. I thought it was really cool. Plus, on that same episode, I did want to mention this because if I had been live tweeting, which I can't do like I used to, and especially late at night, because this would have happened like toward the last hour or the final moments of the show, so it would have probably been like after midnight, 1 o'clock, whatever. There's a point where Joe Bob reads a letter or something like that from someone, and he read a letter from someone who lived in Franklin, Tennessee, and he shouted out the Stardust Drive-In, which is right down from my house. And so my local drive-in got a shout out on the last drive-in. I thought that was really cool.
That is super awesome.
Yeah. So I even shared it with the Stardust Facebook group to just be like, look, you got mentioned on national television or national streaming service. So I thought it was pretty neat just to actually hear that, because even the closest I've gotten thus far would have been Joe Bob shouting out Lebanon for Cracker Barrel, since that's his favorite spot. But to actually hear the town that I live in, the drive-in that I go to, all shouted out on a show that I love, that's just icing on the cake.
Full circle.
Yep. Other little bits I wanted to throw out. One, there is apparently a video game based on Barbarian in the works. Don't know what that would look like, but I would assume maybe something along the lines of maybe Dead by Daylight. I don't know that for certain. I'm just kind of hypothesizing, like, how would you do that other than having someone run around in a cavern trying to escape that thing, that mongoloid.
Yeah, that's what I thought when they mentioned it. I thought it was going to be something along those lines, where maybe I could see it as being a single person game,
Sure,
possibly,
yeah.
where you have to survive, you have to find an escape, and maybe they'll do something where the first few times she catches you, she just takes you to the cage and gives you milk.
Yeah.
But as it gradually, as you gradually escape more, maybe you get more violent toward her. Maybe she begins to get more violent toward you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I saw that I probably saw that right after you did, because I saw it late last night.
Yeah.
But I dig it. I'm enjoying that they're making video games based off of horror characters. I know they're, we got the Killer Clowns game coming out. There is a Michael Myers game. I think it's an indie game that somebody made, but I guess it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Still waiting for a Chucky game. I think a Chucky game would be a lot of fun.
Sure. Speaking of Chucky, so Don Mancini kind of, sort of didn't shoot down the possibility of a Chucky Megan crossover. So I don't know how to take that, other than maybe they're discussing the possibility because it's all under the same umbrella, Universal. So it's not outside the realm of possibility. It's not like they've got to secure rights through this person and that person. So it's plausible. But I think from his standpoint, the possibility does sound appealing, but making it happen in regards to making it the best you can do, other than just being like, we'll just slap them together and see what happens. I think that's where Don Mancini's kind of being hesitant to say it's going to happen, because I feel like he is very protective of Chucky. He has been involved in everything regarding Chucky minus the remake.
Yeah.
So to do this would have to be on the level of Freddy versus Jason. You're going to have to find a very good idea that works and doesn't shit on the legacy of Chucky, for starters. And Megan, I know, doesn't really have a legacy to really speak of, but if you're going to do that, you don't want to take away from that character and what made it so appealing to begin with as well. So,
You know, it would be interesting to do, because I wanted to actually bring up Chucky 2 because I just saw some pictures of Brad Dourif returning, which is just seeing him in human form and not as Chucky in Chucky. Oh my goodness. I might have eeped, not gonna lie. I might have seen that and gone, oh my God. But wow, I just, for some reason I'm thinking about this. Maybe, you know, since Chucky is dying, maybe somehow he returns to his human form in a weird roundabout way. And maybe here's where the Megan crossover could come. He heard about this killer doll, and maybe he thinks the technology is so advanced he could upload his consciousness. That way, if his god has forsaken him, he has another way he can return.
that's true. I think there's a great idea there, and I think that might be the way to go, because if he can have something that's fully formed, like a bigger body, sure, why wouldn't he take advantage? I know his smaller stature as Chucky kind of works, but if you could do something better, something a little bit more, because Megan was kind of superhuman if you think about it, so having a bigger body and that kind of strength and power, I could see that being appealing for Chucky.
Getting an upgrade from an 80s toy to something a little more modern.
And think about it, they could even poke fun at the remake. I mean, this is prime opportunity. The same concept, if you think about it, because even Katrina, and I think we mentioned that before, the Child's Play remake is what Megan, or it could have been Megan if they'd have done it properly, using that same concept, that same idea. But they missed the mark, and then this came along and did it better. So I don't know. I'm hopeful that we'll actually get to see this and it will be good, because I think the right people will be involved to try and ensure that it can be the best thing it possibly can be. So fingers crossed we get news about that later on down the line. The Black Phone apparently is getting a sequel in 2025.
It's one of those things, I don't know how I feel about it, because I feel like the first one holds its own really well.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like when they make movie sequels, it sort of takes away from it.
Sure.
And it's not that I won't enjoy it any less if a sequel comes out, but I don't know. Sometimes I feel like things get taken away from just a little bit when they add sequels to it.
Yeah. If Scott Derrickson and Joe Hill are involved in at least trying to craft the story, I'll be a little bit more relaxed about the idea. Or at least, I don't want to say relaxed. I could give a shit whether or not they make it or not. How about more intrigued by the idea? Because at least...
Yeah.
Obviously, Joe Hill, he knows the material, so if he's got another idea to kind of expand upon that, then let's see where that goes. But Derrickson seemed like he took a lot of care into crafting the original film, so we'll see. Again, right now it's kind of early stages, so we don't even know where it's going to be, and actors are still on strike, shit still getting pushed around, so it's driving me nuts, man. There's movies I want to see, but again, I'm with the actors. I'm not saying that they don't deserve what they deserve. The studios just need to get their shit together and give these people what they deserve. Period. Yeah. Arrow Video is now releasing their version of Carrie on 4K and Ultra HD. And I guess kind of where I mentioned this before, where Scream Factory has been doing 4K releases of the same movies. They did a 4K version of Carrie late last year. So maybe this is just a way for the UK to get theirs. I don't know, because Arrow is a little bit more UK based. So if you can't get it, now's your opportunity. It's coming. Did you see the trailer for Lisa Frankenstein?
I have not got the chance to watch it yet.
Okay.
So please elaborate.
It's a new horror comedy, I guess would be the best term for it. I didn't really get a lot of gore factor out of it. Not that everything has to be gore to be horror, but you know what I mean. It's written by Diablo Cody, who I feel like a lot of people only really associate with the movie Juno, because I think that's the movie that really made her name pop. I know she's done a lot of other things between then and now, but again, I think that's the movie people always remember her from. It's like, oh yeah, that's that person, that writer. And I think she also did Jennifer's Body. I think it was another one she did, or at least wrote.
I think so.
That sounds right. But she wrote this, and it's directed by Zelda Williams, who, if you don't know the name, that is Robin Williams' daughter. And so I think this is her directorial debut because I don't know of any other movies she's directed, but I could
Yeah,
be wrong.
I believe in the articles they actually said that this would be her debut into directing. So,
Well, fingers crossed that'll be good because it has a very... Katrina kind of likened it to Warm Bodies before she saw the title, where I guess that's not even correct, but like the love zombie thing, she thought it was a zombie. I thought a lot of a very obscure 90s horror comedy, My Boyfriend's Back. I don't know if you remember that, but it was about a woman whose boyfriend had died tragically and he get brought back to life. I don't know. Similar vein, but the monster is very... dense, zombie-esque, if you will. And then, of course, she's kind of a modern, kind of looks very 80s, circa 90s, kind of in that range of characterization that Lisa is apparently in. And I'm assuming they're going to cram some sort of history into her being related to the Frankensteins or whatever at some point. I don't know, but it looked like a lot of fun. Valentine's Day, great horror, romantic comedy type thing. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be fun.
yeah.
And
I wanted to
go ahead.
on a side. This is just a side note because talking about Robin Williams, I just wanted to say this real quick because I thought this was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I don't normally give studios a ton of credit. I will give Disney some credit though. This isn't horror related, but I love Robin Williams, so I have to say this. So they just released their 100-year anniversary. It's a little short that they did. It's called Once Upon a Studio. It's where all the characters come out of their pictures after shop closes up, and they all take a big picture to celebrate 100 years of Disney.
Mm.
Well, they got a bunch of the original voice actors to come back and everything, and Genie is actually in the short.
Mm.
And a lot of people were like, did they use AI? Did they find a voice actor? Did they find some clips of Robin Williams that they used? Here's what I appreciate about this. Multiple sources have actually come out. They've proven that this is true.
Mm-hmm.
Disney went back through some old archive footage because Robin Williams recorded hours as the Genie. They found a clip that they really liked, and legally they were able to use it without anyone's permission. But they got a hold of the original one of the original animators that animated Genie.
Mm.
And here's where I'm really happy with Disney right at the moment. They actually reached out to Robin Williams' estate, and they talked to his family, and they said, we have an idea for Genie in the short. Genie meant a lot to a lot of people. This clip that Robin Williams did back in the day is fantastic. It would work great. Can we use it? And they actually got permission from his estate.
Awesome.
So I am going to give them props for that because I don't know if you've gotten to watch the short. There's a lot of little like Easter eggs in it that are really cool.
Mm.
But it's actually a super funny line. Another character falls and Genie pops up out of a piece of paper like he's being drawn.
Mm.
And he pops up out of it and he goes, I haven't seen a fall that bad since Rome. And that's the only line. That's all it is. But to hear him, like to me, it was nostalgic.
Yeah.
So I know that's not horror related, but I wanted to actually give Disney some props because I thought that was really cool that they got permission and everything when they didn't have to.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, no, I get it. I wish I'd have brought this up before, and I don't know why I didn't write this down in my notes because I remember seeing it. I remember I wanted to touch on it around the same time that I was talking about Terrifier 3, and I forgot to jot it down, but I just found it again, and I want to bring it up now. So, did you hear that Damien Leone apparently has an idea for Friday the 13th and would love to take a crack at it, but he doesn't think that they will hire him?
I did see that, and I would really be interested to see what direction he would want to take Jason because, in all honesty, I love Friday the 13th. I love Nightmare on Elm Street. I love Halloween. I think these characters need to be brought up a little bit more. They're brutal enough, but I think the brutality needs to be turned up a little bit more with these characters in modern day, and I think he would be the man to do it. Especially
Jason. I mean,
yeah.
If you take a look at art, I wouldn't say that they are equal in their ways of killing, but I think that Damien Leone would come up with some very, very clever kills for Jason that would be on par with what he does with art, but he'd also have to find a way to ensure that he's not imparting that same type of the way that Art kills would not equate the same as Jason. Do you know what I mean? Like where he gets playful with it and he goes a little overboard. I never saw that to be Jason. Jason is efficient, but he can be gruesome. So if you can find that way to just make it gruesome but efficient, there you go. Then you've got your Jason. And I think he could come up with some awesome stuff. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be hired, because Terrifier 2 showed that people love that character, that he's capable. And if 3 does equally good, then they can market from that. Friday the 13th, from the director of Terrifier. There's your audience right there. You've just sold them because you're saying the guy who did Terrifier is directing Jason. I mean, what more do you need?
That would market itself.
Yeah, you're done. So I think you would get people in seats. I mean, I would be there. So
100%. And I got to meet him at one of the conventions, and he is like one of the most down-to-earth, nice guys you would ever meet. Mm-hmm. I would definitely be rooting for him if he could get his hands on it. Yeah, I would be interested to see what he could do with it.
So I'm hoping that I guess it's Blumhouse that they're the ones talking about it right now. I don't know if they're still in the running to make it. Whoever is looking to make it, consider him. Highly consider him, because I don't think you could go wrong. I think you would have someone who would understand the ins and outs of making a horror film and do it well and make Jason scary.
Yeah.
Not that he can't be, but like you said, he's kind of lost. Some of those characters have lost their edge over time. They need to be reinvigorated with fear, and I think he could do it.
Yeah, it's almost like you're creating a new character.
Mm-hmm.
You're reinventing something that's already there, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a full-fledged remake. He could do a sequel all these years later where it's maybe Jason's gotten much more brutal because Jason's been around for so long. I mean, I don't know. I would be for it, let me put it this way. If one film proves to me that you can make a character really memorable with their brutality, aside from Art the Clown, look at the Hatchet series. Mm-hmm. You have Kane Hodder, who played Jason, who's playing another hulking slasher character who had really brutal kills, and it's memorable. One of my favorite scenes is the sander scene.
Yeah.
It's just a gas-powered sander. He sands the shit out of that guy, and I still just I remember it.
Mm-hmm.
And he hacks Tony Todd in half with a hatchet, and then he skins him alive. Mm-hmm. I mean, come on.
Brutal, but awesome. He would be another one to consider as well, but at the same time, I feel like he did Jason. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. Like, it proves that you can make a character really brutal and make them memorable. If you're already working with the foundation of, we're giving you Jason Voorhees, that's a big foundation.
Sure.
You've seen how brutal Jason's been in the past. Just turn it up to 11 and let him loose.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I like that idea that you had talked about, that you had seen somewhere where the convicts are on the island.
Yeah. Oh.
That would be a cool movie.
Hell yeah.
That would be badass.
Yeah.
So.
2 more things I want to bring up. One is we finally have an official cast, or at least who is who in Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. While I was a little, I guess, not sure who Christoph Waltz was going to be playing, there was a part of me, because I wasn't sure what this movie was going to be. So a part of me was just like, well, if he was Dr. Frankenstein, that would be awesome. But apparently he's going to be playing a different character based on the way it's being told. But understandably, I think it's okay in this regard. So it seems like right now it's working under the title Prodigal Father. And it's set in 19th century Europe. And the story is going to be focused on Dr. Pretorius, who Christoph Waltz seems to be playing. And he's trying to track down Frankenstein's monster, who he believed to have died in a fire 40 years ago before continuing the experiments of Dr. Frankenstein. So with that being said, if he's playing that character, then it seems like he'll be kind of the main focus, which, again, works for this. So I'm cool with that. But the other characters that we're going to get to see, and it seems like this is going to be almost like a pseudo sequel to the others. I mean, it kind of seems like that. If that's what we're doing, Andrew Garfield is going to be playing Dr. Frankenstein, which is an inspired choice. So I was like, all right, I could see that. Oscar Isaac is playing the monster.
Okay.
And Mia Goth is playing the bride. So
I can dig that.
I'm digging the cast, yeah, for sure, because all 4 of those names are solid. So you've got me, and then Guillermo del Toro on top of it. I'm sold. I'm there. Just tell me when.
Yeah, there's just something about his work that I absolutely love. There's a series on Netflix. I think it's called Cabinet of Curiosities that he did. It's like a horror anthology type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just go watch that. That proves what that man is capable of. I mean, everything that he does proves what he is capable of. He's just so good at what he does.
He is. So the last thing I want to bring up, and I want to preface this by saying I understand where this is coming from, but I want your take on it, because I guess perhaps maybe I'm seeing things through a different lens. Maybe I need to understand it through a different lens. But apparently there has been a campaign going on through a charity called Changing Faces. And they have been reaching out to various networks and streaming sites, and they're asking them to add disclaimers to horror films for any villains that have what they consider visible differences. Scars, Freddy Krueger, where his face is all burned and everything like that. Kind of saying that these movies are enforcing a negative stereotype that people with scars, burns, marks are villains. And while, yes, they technically most of the time are villains, how do I put this? I don't think of everybody who has a burn or a mark or a scar on their face as a villain. I don't see people like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to just assume that everybody views somebody with a scar on their face or on their body, no matter how big or small, that they're a villain.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time with it. So here's a bit of their statement. It says, every year, Halloween becomes a particularly stressful time for some of those with visible differences, where villainous film characters with scars, marks, burns, or conditions are often recreated in costumes, as well as becoming terms of abuse in everyday life. Harmful beliefs that scars and marks equate to evil can be reinforced through instant access to decades of archived content without explanation of the impact, and undoubtedly contribute to others and abuse of those with visible differences. Now, I hear what they're saying. Perhaps we're just not those people. I know that there are plenty of assholes in the world who would do that. So I guess I see where they're coming from, but I don't want to say the woke word, but you know.
I personally think there's a few assholes that ruin everything for everyone.
Yeah.
And I hate to say this and be this guy. Sometimes people are way too sensitive. To me, I think what they're doing is like a noble cause. Mm-hmm. I think it comes from a good place, but I think it's for the wrong reasons, if that makes sense.
Right.
To me, it feels like they're going, well, people are that way because of horror movies. Like they're finding something to blame for the way that people act. Yeah. The sad truth of the matter is, some people are just assholes.
Sure.
You know, I'll give you a perfect example. You know, most of these characters in these films that have these scars and things, it's way played up.
Yeah.
You're never going to see a burn victim that looks like Freddy Krueger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had a little girl, perfect example here too. I had a little girl one year. I was going to go back in the house because I didn't want to scare her. And she saw part of my face and she took my hand. I felt a little hand take my hand and she said, "It's okay. I'm not scared of you." Mm-hmm. And she walked off with one of her parents, and her other parent said, "We actually have a family member that was in a fire." So she sort of associated my burns. She sort of associated my burns with what their burns looked like. It exactly wasn't the same.
Yeah.
But that little girl had no fear. She didn't think I was some mean, scary monster. You know, we live in a world now, and I don't want to sound political. I am all for people not bullying people and things like that. Like, I don't think it's right to judge somebody based off of the color of their skin, their religion, their sexuality, anything like that.
Yeah.
But I also think people are a little too sensitive these days. I think the world's forgotten that sometimes you do need to have a thick skin. Sometimes people are going to judge you.
Yeah.
And if horror movies have taught me anything, it's that the worst monsters out there don't look like monsters.
And funny enough, to kind of even further your point, the horror community themselves, they are not going to be the ones judging you. They will be the ones embracing you, telling you, you're one of us, get on in here. And it's the other people who don't watch horror, who don't give a shit about it, that are going to be the assholes who make these assessments and judgments. I guarantee you. I mean, sure, there are a lot of bad apples in every bunch, but for the most part, 99% of the horror community, any of these people with scars, visible marks, whatever, you're one of us. One of us. One of us. Come on.
You don't bat an eye at it.
Yeah.
You know, people are born. Some people are born different. Some people have accidents. Things happen. But to say that there's some negative stereotype, I don't understand that for the simple fact it'd be like saying that if I got out of the tub and I was a little pruny and somebody made fun of me, it'd be like me going, oh, you're doing that because you watched Friday the 13th.
Mm-hmm.
And Jason's all pruny because he drowned. Like, I don't know. It's hard to wrap my head around this concept because I get what they are doing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's, you know, these monsters don't look like real people.
Mm.
That's where the difference is. I understand some horror movies now are a little bit more realistic. Things are a little bit, you know, more based in reality with certain things. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to walk by a burn victim and think that they're going to haunt me in my dreams.
Right.
You know, I'm not going to think that someone was, you know, hurt. We had a family member who, my uncle that passed away when he had his surgery. He had a trach put in, and he lost a bunch of weight, and he, you know, to some kids that might have, to some little kids that might have been a little scary. My first time my son saw him after everything, my son was a little thrown off by it, but he didn't compare him to some, you know, monster on something, and it quickly made a turn because he was able to associate reality from fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, his uncle looked different, but it was still the same person. You know, I don't think this is one of those things that people need a disclaimer. I think people just need to learn to be decent.
Yeah. And again, I don't want people to think that we're saying we don't get where this is coming from. Absolutely 100% do. I just feel like maybe there's a better way to go about it. But again, perhaps all the assholes in the world, there's way too many, and this is the only option they could come up with. But I just hate that we feel like that this is what we have to do and I've never done that, or at least I've never thought to myself, ooh, look at that grotesque individual over there looking like Freddy Krueger and shit. That's just not in my DNA, you know? I can be hateful to people, but not like that.
No, you know, it's unfortunate that we have gotten to this point, and it seems like there's going to be a point where everything has a disclaimer before it.
Mm-hmm.
Music, movies, TV shows, everything. And I understand certain traumatic experiences. Maybe there being disclaimers for things like that because some movies do hit on some heavy topics, things like drug abuse and, you know, murder, rape, violence against children. And I understand that there should be a disclaimer because some people have been through those traumas.
Yeah.
And maybe this is one of those things where I'm sure there are people that have been, you know, made fun of or made to look a certain way because they physically look different. People judge each other on their appearance all the time. But to have scars and things, yes, I won't say that I've never made a joke, but I've made a joke at my own expense when I burnt my forehead. I remember us doing a show. I had burnt my forehead pretty bad, and I told you I was trying to be Freddy Krueger.
Yeah.
But that was a joke at my own expense.
Right,
I would not make a joke at someone else's expense.
Sure.
Because you don't know what happened to these people. You don't know, you know, we had neighbors, I'll say right now, we had neighbors that their kids were burned. And when you get the whole story, their house had caught on fire. The parents actually died saving their children.
Shit.
So, you know, those kids never got made fun of, though, around, like, it's changed since then. Now kids around here are jerks,
Sure.
to say the least. And I think a lot of that falls on people. People need to learn to be better. They need to learn, not to make fun of people because, and this might sound mean, but I do believe in karma to a degree, and I do believe that people who poke fun at people who are different and things like that, I honestly think karma should pay them a visit.
Sure.
That way they can experience what they poke fun at. So, but that's insane.
So, let's talk about our headline this week. We watched Five Nights at Freddy's. I did not go to the theater to see it because, hey, Peacock, that's a thing. And
yep.
So, where do we start?
Well, I want to just say I just saw something that I thought I would just kind of point out. I just saw an article that said it actually broke box office records. It made $68 million over the weekend.
Wow. Okay.
That's pretty impressive so far.
Sure, yeah. And well, I guess a little backstory for anybody that might not know. I feel like this franchise, coming from where I came from initially in podcasting, video games, for me, this is common knowledge, but sometimes I feel like a lot of these things get lost in the shuffle, and I have to remind myself not everybody knows the same stuff I know. So, if you're unfamiliar, this is based on a very popular video game series that I think it was just a mobile game initially, and then it found its way onto other platforms maybe. But
yeah,
it was a very straightforward scare tactic game. That's the best way I could put it, where you just sit looking at monitors and you tap a button and you watch the monitors and you're looking for the animatronics that are coming to get you, and then you have to do things to kind of stop them or prevent them from getting to you. And then again, you have to do this over the course of 5 nights, and you just have to survive, and it gets harder every night. It was a very clever idea for a game, and one that I can understand why the popularity of it took off. Now, what happened to it over the course of its subsequent sequels and spin-offs and what have you, I don't know. I didn't keep up with the story. The farthest I kept up with the story was watching another YouTuber, Matt Pat, do a show called Game Theory, where he would dissect the stories. That's where I got it. I found his dissections of the story more entertaining to me than trying to watch it and figure it out for myself. So, in regards to how this story adapts that, I feel like they take a few liberties based on some things that I know, and also kind of intertwine a few details here. Now, this could be a straight remake to the story. I don't know that for 100%, but from where I'm standing, I feel like they took a liberty or two here and there to kind of expand on that. So
yeah, and I feel like anytime they do an adaptation from a video game or a comic or anything to a movie, they always take a lot of liberties. I don't know the lore very well for Five Nights at Freddy's. I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I know a little bit. Excuse me. I know a little bit about it, but as far as this goes, I think they stayed true to maybe the overall plot, but as you said, they did take a few liberties. And I think they really tied it in. They did focus on a lot of the grief of our main character, which is Mike. For a little context to the story, don't want to spoil too much for people. I'm sure people have probably already watched it by the time this comes out. If you haven't, watch it. Yeah. Mike keeps going back to a memory of his brother Garrett when his brother was taken from him. And somehow going to Freddy's seems to help him remember. And he works through his grief throughout the film and ultimately makes some pretty questionable choices as far as I'm concerned.
Sure.
But let's talk about Mike real quick. Let's talk about Josh Hutcherson real quick.
Okay.
Because I enjoyed his performance in this film. I thought he did a decent job. There were a few parts where I feel like he could have been a little more sincere. Mm-hmm. But overall, I did like his performance. I kind of have a love-hate thing for him. Like, I like him as an actor, but I've seen him in a lot of roles where he plays like a punk kid, and I don't particularly care for him in that regard.
Sure.
If that makes sense. because he's good at, apparently he's good enough at what he does that I always compare him to that punk kid.
Right.
And even in the beginning of this film, he beats the shit out of that guy at the I think, is it an airport? I think it is. He's working at
mall.
Mall.
Yeah,
It's a mall. But he beats the shit out of that guy in the fountain, and he loses his job. And
yeah,
whew.
he was like, wow, yeah. I felt like he overreacted like immediately. Like, whoa, what are you doing, man? Because again, I understand where he's coming from, but I was like, holy shit, dude, you just like completely assumed everything in that moment, and you're gonna get screwed. But again, at least they explained why, because in that moment, understanding his grief with his brother and how that happened, I guess I can understand where that kind of reaction would come from.
Yeah.
So,
but I will say, and after watching the film, before we talk about other characters, I will say this, and this might come off a little shocking. I almost wish this film would have been maybe 15 to 20 minutes longer.
Okay.
Because I felt like some of the storytelling was a little rushed, and I feel like if they would have made it just a tiny bit longer, not much longer, just a tiny bit longer, they could have maybe touched on a few things just a little more.
Okay.
And I think it would have added a little more meaning to certain things.
Mm-hmm.
I think they did a good job at really showing Mike's struggle with his brother and everything, but I feel like they could have focused on a few other characters a little bit more. They could have maybe focused on the history with the animatronics, because at the end of the day, I felt like we were just being read a list, like, oh yeah, here's why this is happening, and then they just have like a list in front of them. I got that feeling from it.
Right.
And I feel like a little bit more would have been good, or maybe they could have revamped a few things a little bit. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I felt like there were some bits that I don't want to say it didn't quite get fleshed out, but also felt like in regards to what you're saying, I felt like they could have trimmed a few things because there were times, I guess we're going to have to say either save it for spoilers or separate it or what have you, because there were just certain times, I'll just say this, and if we want to talk spoilers, we'll set that aside for a little bit later.
Let's do it. We can talk spoilers. I don't mind.
What's her name? The daughter.
Vanessa?
Vanessa. And see, I just spoiled some shit right there. Anyway, she, the wishy-washy way, and again, they explained why she was being wishy-washy, but that whole thing where he would ask questions, she'd be like, well, I just can't say anything. Well, I can't say anything. It was just this roundabout. It's like, God damn, what? Come on, just get on with it. Spill the beans. But again, they come back to her and she's like, well, this is why I couldn't say anything. It's like, but I just don't even like that idea because it felt so tacked on. Why would you go along with this for so long?
Yeah.
And what I'm talking about, again, spoilers, we're just going to spoil the shit out of this movie. So
why not?
Her character, what was her name again? Vanessa.
Vanessa Monroe. She is the daughter of William Afton, who is the big baddie.
Yeah. By the way, called that from the start. There was no moment where I felt like, I wonder. No, it was like absolutely yes. You're setting this whole thing up, and then it didn't take long to pretty much put two and two together that he's the killer.
Yeah, which I have some comments about that, but I'll save those when we get a little bit further and we talk about his character. But
yes, with Vanessa, she was apparently just I don't even really know what her job was. It was like he would bring people in and she would just try to convince them to stay there, but she didn't because just stay out of the way. If they need a job and he's giving them that job, then what more do you need? Her whole reason should be to keep them there, not to ward them off, because that's what she was doing the entire time. It's like, I don't think you should be here. It's dangerous here.
See, the feeling that I got from it was, so obviously the Mike's little sister Abby was drawing all these pictures way ahead of when he even started working there.
Yeah.
So she was like seeing these kids. So to me, it feels like it felt like Afton was somehow triggering something in her mind to draw her to the place.
Yeah.
And gradually he knew that her brother would get fired and that he would end up having to settle and work there. And I feel like up until that point, he needed the security guards previously that worked there. He needed them to die or he needed them gone. And I feel like his daughter, I feel like Vanessa, I feel like in the regard of before Mike came along, her job was to convince the people to stay. Convince them to stay and be gone or get rid of them.
Right.
Leading up to this point. I think the whole goal of Afton and his daughter and everything was to get Mike and Abby there. He wanted Abby, and at the toward the end of the movie, he tells her, your job was to keep him in the dark.
Right.
Because he was their source to get to Abby. So I feel like Afton wanted to add to the collection of his animatronics.
Right.
And I honestly think Vanessa started to get feelings for Mike. That was the vibe that I got.
Yeah, sure. And I guess how it all played out is what kind of bothered me, because it just felt, I mean, if you really cared about him, and she knew everything that he was going through, and it was just like, God damn, so you're just toying with this dude. Or at least that's the way it seemed to me.
Yeah. I wish they would have, I wish they, like, this, and I guess maybe this is where I thought maybe, they should have added just a little bit, and maybe they wouldn't have had to made the movie longer, maybe just, change things a little bit. Maybe every time she was getting wishy-washy about things, maybe she was getting a call and she had to take the call, and maybe it was her father. We don't have to know that was her father calling. Obviously, she's intimidated by him. She's terrified of him. That could have been a reveal at the end, that every time she was going off, when he would ask questions, every time she would go off.
Yeah.
It was because of that. And a lot of people might go, well, how would that make sense? How would he know when she was calling? Every time she showed up there, those animatronics are there. Those animatronics serve him.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like they couldn't. They're supernatural. It's not like they couldn't have reached out to him somehow.
Yeah. And there was just so much about that would just kind of bug the shit out of me. Just little things like that like, she's a cop, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
So at no point she decided that I don't need this from this prick and I could turn him in. And granted, I understand that she could be charged as an accessory, but she could be like, well, I was being forced into this, and this was my way out to become a cop and then turn him in, because she knew this entire time. And it's just, it's mind-boggling to me. It's hard to be sympathetic.
To me, that would create a much deeper story if we could have seen why she was so hell-bent on pleasing him.
Yes.
And who knows, maybe this is something that, I'm sure there's going to be a sequel. Maybe it's something they'll touch on. But obviously he is this very imposing figure to be able to keep this control over her. And I wish we would have seen a little more of that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that would answer a lot of questions as far as that regard. Now, while we're on the subject of William Afton, let's talk about Matthew Lillard.
Yeah.
Because I watched another review and somebody made a good point, and I didn't think about it until I had seen the guy talk about it before I watched the movie, but I didn't think about it until after I watched the movie. Matthew Lillard is letting off a lot of Stu vibes.
I thought the same thing.
And the guy that I heard review the movie, he said the only bad thing about it was we didn't get enough of it.
Sure, yeah.
And I wholeheartedly agree. And I don't know if it's just the character that he was in this, the Yellow Rabbit. I don't know if it was just that, or if that character does it, or if they were really making a reference to Scream. When he pulls the knife out and he rubs the knife, he did that when he was Ghostface.
He did.
And that's instantly what it made me think. And I loved every moment of it. There's a certain energy that he brings to things. And when he has his Stu energy, as I put it, it's phenomenal. And it works for this because you don't know what he's going to do next.
Right.
He's just completely nuts. And I never thought a yellow rabbit beating the shit out of somebody could be cool. But I actually really thought that whole scene where him and Mike are fighting and he kicks Mike and Mike flies across the room a little bit.
Yeah.
I thought that was played out really well.
Mm-hmm.
So, what were your thoughts on Matthew Lillard in this?
He was the highlight. Now, again, that's not to take away from Josh Hutcherson. Like you said, he's one of those that I know of. I don't think I've seen him in a lot of stuff. I was never a Hunger Games fan or anything like that. So, but I know he was in that. I know that was probably one of his biggest roles that he's had up to date. I think he did fine. I think he sold the concept, the idea of Mike and that trauma that he's going through. But yeah, when it comes to Matthew Lillard, he was chewing up the scenery when he finally got to unleash the murderous side of him. He was very subdued at the beginning, but you could tell he was off because the telltale sign for me was the moment he said his name and he stopped before he said his last name. I was like, oh, okay, so you're up to something. You know some shit. And I mean, that's pretty much a dead giveaway right there.
Yeah.
And again, I think he was probably one of the biggest highlights. I think he just sold every ounce of it.
The whole phone conversation when he's when he's explaining to Josh Hutcherson's character about what he's going to be doing, about the work, that whole conversation, that whole message that he leaves him, the whole time I'm hearing that, I'm thinking, yeah, you're going to be some really terrible bad guy, and you knew right at the beginning what was going to happen. And I love that he sold it. And even when he ripped the head off, I really thought it was going to be cheesy, him in this kitty animatronic costume, talking and everything. I thought it was going to be kind of weird,
but it worked.
And yeah, and that's what I loved about it. And then when he had the head on, his voice kind of came through, but then you had like the robotic voice. Speaking of like the voice and the sound coming through with him talking, that was another thing that I thought really worked well, and that I've heard a lot of people give praise to, the sound in this movie.
Yeah.
For people who might not know, Jim Henson, the Muppets, his company actually created the Five Nights at Freddy's animatronics for this movie. They used puppets for a decent chunk of the movie, and then they had people in suits when you would see the full body.
Yeah.
And whoever the sound guys were for this did a really good job at showing that these are heavy, metallic creations. And to me, that's what really sells it. People don't always understand how important sound is in films. And I feel like they did a really great job. And I feel like the designs were really good too. It really, to me, it felt like they pulled them right out of the game.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All that stuff, the animatronics, the designs, absolutely spot on. I don't think there was a thing about them that did not resemble the games themselves. They were like on point. So really, really impressive stuff there. Okay, here's another thing that bugged the shit out of me. Maybe you can clarify, because apparently I missed it. But another welcome sight would have been Mary Stuart Masterson, who was playing the aunt who was trying to take. That's another story point, by the way. So, what's his name again? Mike.
Yeah, Mike.
Mike and Abby are brother and sister, if we have not clarified that. And they never. Okay, so again, I understand there can be time gaps. Okay, co-host of Super Mega Crash Beyond, Lace, has told me numerous times she was an oopsie baby because there's a gap between her and her older siblings, like a good 15-20 year gap, to my understanding.
Yeah.
So again, this is not outside the realm of possibility that a grown-ass man would have a child for a sister. But at first, obviously, my assumptions were, oh, that's his daughter. And it's like, no.
That's what I thought at first. So.
Yeah. But then they clarify, no, it's his sister. They never explain where she came along at. So I'm assuming she was an oopsie baby too. But then the family dies, so he's left to take care of her. Or, excuse me, the mother dies and the father takes off. That's at least how we understand it.
Yeah.
Then they never explain why the Aunt Jane, or whatever her name is, played by Mary Stuart Masterson, is trying to get custody of her. Like, why it's so important, but she's very, very adamant about it.
The only explanation that we remotely get, I think, is sort of in the form of a joke, but I'm not sure. I think Mike is having a conversation with the teacher, and he says she doesn't even care about Abby. She just wants the government check every month.
Oh, okay. Well, then that would...
I don't know if that's the actual reason, but it is something that is said.
Hey, that's enough of a reason, because I know people just like that. So if that's her deal, then great. At least we have some sort of understanding. She just wants the money. And then when we get toward the end, when I guess it was Freddy came looking for Abby, what happened to her? Because she was, she was babysitting, and I don't remember seeing what happened to her when Freddy came into the house.
Well, I know when they're leaving, Abby looks over and you can see her feet.
Okay.
She's like laying on the floor, and the little boy whose spirit is possessing Freddy, another spoiler for everybody, like his spirit appears and he goes, "Your silly Aunt Jane, she fell asleep." And they like wander off. So I don't know what Freddy did. Obviously, with this being a PG-13 movie, they don't show, all of the violence on camera, which that's another thing that kind of bums me out a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I guess one of the film creators actually posted up that there's not going to be a rated R version released,
Right.
which is kind of a bummer. Like, I get that the audience for this film is more children, so I understand that, but I still think a rated R version would have been interesting to see. I know a lot of people said this was a good, like, gateway film for kids to watch.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I would let my kid watch it, just because he might freak out just a little bit.
Yeah, my daughter came into the room when we were watching it, and she kind of got a little excited. Of course, she came in during one of the lighter moments, which I do want to talk about that too. This was a shocker for me from... Again, what I know about the lore, I didn't know that Freddy and his pals could have had a good side. It makes sense, but I never saw them as playful characters. And there's a scene when Abby meets them, and you think, oh my God, they're trying to kill her. And she's like, no, they're just playing with me. And you're like, what? So then they all kind of hang out and clean up and do all this stuff, make like a fort or whatever. And it's kind of surprising, and I thought, oh, this is an interesting wrinkle to the story, and it kind of intrigued me. Now, Calliope had walked in around that time, and she kind of watched for a minute, but her ADHD, I honestly feel like she has it, because she was like, no, I'm good, and then walks out, like all excited about the movie, but not going to stick around and watch it. And I was like, all right, well. And, would I have ran her out of the room? I don't know. I think I would have been curious, like you said, gateway. See if it would intrigue her, see if it would be something she would actually want to watch, because she's watched PG-13 movies before. Now, not in a horror aspect, but she has seen PG-13.
And see, my son's the same way. He's seen a few PG-13 movies, but I don't know if there's just certain things that happen in it. I don't know if it would be like terrifyingly shocking to him, or just like, holy crap, I can't believe that happened.
Yeah.
I wanted to say, you talking about them having a good side and being kids, like that's something I kind of wish too, that and I get they're just establishing an overall story to start us with,
right.
And I hope that they sort of touch on it a little bit more as it progresses. I hope they touch on the fact that these are children.
Mm-hmm.
They did not ask to be made into these things.
Yeah. That was another part of the story that I kind of wanted a little clarification on. This is the part where I would want it to be expanded. How?
Yeah.
We understand that he killed these kids and he stole their bodies and stuffed them in the machines. Yeah, that's pretty fucked up. But then how did they become possessed within because that's a supernatural element. It's already messed up enough that the kids are being stuffed in these animatronics to hide the bodies. That's gruesome. But then now you're saying that their spirits are now possessing these animatronics. How? And I know people could just be like, well, ghosts and shit, but
see, what I'm wondering is, so at the end of the movie, when Afton is in his suit and the pieces of the suit are starting to clamp down onto him, I'm wondering if that's sort of what happened. I wonder if the kids were still alive when he took them and he put them into the suits and they died within the suits.
Now that could potentially kind of give way to the ghost theory. Because what's that, like a severe trauma? I've heard that in something like that kind of causes a spirit to remain.
To attach to something, yes.
Yeah. So that one little detail could have really clarified a lot.
And I know there's probably some Five Nights at Freddy's fan listening right now going, it's been explained. And please, by all means, explain it to us.
Please.
I'm about to look up some YouTube videos and look at the lore. That's one thing I will say this movie did for me. It made me a little more curious because I knew a little bit about Five Nights at Freddy's, but after watching this, I'm like, I want to know a little bit more. I want some more answers. It made me want to do some research about it.
Yeah, I can see that.
I haven't done it yet, but I will say that's one thing I'll give this movie props for. It did make me a little more curious as to what was going on, and I've heard things about the characters that I've not really got to see in this movie, like Chica is a perfect example, the chicken animatronic. Chica views the little cupcake as its baby.
Yeah.
And I guess Chica is one of the more friendly out of the animatronics. Chica actually, in the games and in the lore, I guess Chica has tried to help the kids before, like try to escape and things like that. So that's something that I would really like to see, maybe played out and see what would happen with it. Because at the end of the day, they're all kids and they want, they wanted Abby to be like them, so they would have someone to play with.
Yeah.
But they were also being convinced by Afton, and that's another thing that I want to know. I want to know how he has such control over them.
Right. That's a very specific detail that is just not really explained, and you're just like, but how? He's their murderer. And again, I understand that, what was it they said, that it was almost like he confused them, like they didn't know that he was the killer, but how would you not remember?
Yeah.
Maybe the suit. I don't know.
It's almost like they still like they know they're not real children anymore, but there's still a childlike side to them.
Yeah.
And that childlike side is what appeals to Afton, because the way that they end up beating him is Abby draws a picture showing that the yellow rabbit is actually bad.
Yeah.
So maybe that's right. Maybe what you said was right. The suit and everything. Maybe they see him as their friendly leader.
It's the only thing that makes any sense to me, because, like I said, there's just certain little elements that I feel like maybe they felt like it wasn't necessary to explain every little detail, but I feel like there are some that you kind of need to clarify on, because it seems a little vague, and vague works in some cases, but not all the time. And I feel like this is a time it doesn't really work for the narrative.
Yeah. I'm sort of with my wife a little bit in regard. She kind of popped up at the end of the movie and was watching some of it with me. And the ending was a little anticlimactic. Yeah. I think. I understand that leaves room for the sequel, that they lock Afton in the room all by himself. And, the eyeball lights are still flickering on his suit. And Afton did say, I always come back.
Which is a funny little...
Yeah, I'm like, you always come back? Have you come back before?
Yeah, you ain't Chucky, man. What are you talking about?
But now he's going to be more integrated with the suit. So that's going to be an interesting way to see things. He's going to be kind of like them. Yeah. But then it turns into, are these animatronics going to be up against each other? Are they going to be trying to protect the kids? Or, is it going to all be a big battle for who's going to be dominant over everything?
And I feel like that's what you're setting up. I mean, I don't know what other way you would look at it but that. So...
And it's cool that the animatronics can leave. Because, they leave to go get Abby. And I think that's going to really play a hand in everything. I think in the next film, maybe we should leave Freddy's and have them go out and be a little bit more prominent in other locations as well. I think that would be kind of cool to see.
Sure.
So, another thing that I wanted to point out real quick. This film is sort of suffering from the same thing that the Super Mario movie suffered from. If you go on to Rotten Tomatoes, which I'm just using them as my example right now, there's other reviews as well. The critics are really tearing into this movie. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 26% from Rotten Tomatoes. Audience score is 89%. Same thing happened with the Mario movie.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like fans of the franchise, which makes sense, fans of the franchise really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Somebody who may not know the franchise, like us, you either... To me, it's one of those things you either... I don't want to say you either love it or hate it, because in all honesty, I'm not going to say that this was a bad movie. I don't think it was a bad movie.
No, I would not say it's a movie that was like absolutely one of the worst, biggest pieces of shit I've ever seen in my life. Absolutely not. It was fine for what it was, but it left me wanting a lot.
Yeah.
Again, kind of what you said. I understand this is for kids, or they know their audience is younger kids, so PG-13, sure. But at the same time, it left me wanting to see that gore. Almost, not to say that it would have made it better. I'm not going to sit there and say gore equates quality.
Yeah.
But I feel like it would have given me something to enjoy, to add some enjoyments. Like, well, even if the story is kind of like, meh, I know I've got some good kills and gore and stuff like that I can kind of enjoy. That's kind of like why we watch bad horror movies. I know Friday the 13th is not a great narrative. I understand that. It's weak, but it's entertaining because I know the kills are coming. So I can... I don't even say I suffer through it. They're fine. I mean, this is on par with that for me.
Yeah. To me, it was like there were scenes in it that were kind of campy and cheesy. It reminded me, as weird as it sounds, it reminded me of like an 80s kids horror film.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of gore. It's cheesy. It's campy. Every scene with, and I know I can't remember its name off the top of my head, but the little cupcake. Every scene with the little cupcake attacking, I didn't know whether to be like kind of shocked or kind of chuckle about it.
Yeah, now...
but I enjoyed it.
I do want to talk about that too, because I had to... I guess Katrina had pointed that out because she had watched it with me, and I kind of got confused for a moment until she kind of mentioned the cupcake, but I was trying to figure out the 5 children because there were only 4 big animatronics.
Yeah.
And I wasn't counting the cupcake as a 5th until it actually attacked, and I was like, oh, okay, so that might be the 5th kid. But that did confuse me for a minute, because you'd see the 5 kids in his dream, and then I started counting at one point. I was like, there's only 4 animatronics. Where's the 5th kid? And I thought maybe that was going to be some big reveal, and I guess technically it was once the cupcake went, like, turned into a critter or something like that. But I don't know, it wasn't a big surprise. I guess I was waiting for something a little bit more. It was just like, oh, okay.
I will say this much. That kid got cheated.
Yeah.
He really did.
Yeah, you got turned into a damn cupcake. What the shit?
And I will say, the entire scene where they where the people break in, which it really killed me, because I was really hoping Max was going to be a nice character.
Yeah.
But the whole scene where her and her brother or whatever break in with the other guys, and they're all in there, and that's where we see some of the kills and everything. The big guy screaming like a girl and just running into the closet, and Bunny's in there waiting for him. Like, that whole scene was just magic to me. And Max probably had the one death in this film that was actually fairly gory that we got to see, even though I have to admit, she made a huge horror movie mistake.
Yeah, what are you doing? Sticking your head in shit, man.
That arm reaches out, bites her in half. I saw that scene, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I can mess with this movie now. That was pretty good.
And it was more stuff like that I was kind of hoping for, but I felt like we kind of got cheated on it because we didn't get a lot of that. It was jump scares and little things like that. I didn't feel like we got kills like we should have.
Yeah.
It's like that one scene was the time that we really got to see everything get amped up a little bit, but...
And maybe that's because of the PG-13 rating. Next time, give us a hard PG-13 if you're going to do PG-13 again.
Yeah, I think there was maybe one scene where we really got... it was one of the victims when... I can't even remember his name. Josh Hutcherson's character. Mike. It's a simple name. I should remember Mike. But when he was in they had dragged him into the closet, wherever they're storing all the bodies, and he was about to get his face buzzed off, and then you saw the corpses of the other people, and one of them, I guess it was the one that got their face gnawed off by that thing. You saw it briefly, and I was like, oh, okay, so we're getting a little gore now, finally. But it would
have been interesting to see that happen.
Yeah, because it looks painful, and you're setting it up to be painful, but yet we don't get it, and I was...
Now, hearing it was good.
Mm-hmm.
The sound department, again, I'll give them props. Hearing the bones crunching and everything else, I'll give them that. Like, that's enough to make you go, oh man. But again, seeing it, I'm not saying gore makes a horror movie, but when we're seeing these big killer animatronics, you kind of want that little bit of extra.
Yeah,
it's just the icing on the cake.
Especially I feel like for a movie like this, when things are not, I'm sure there are people out there who would absolutely disagree with what I'm about to say, but for a movie that's not firing on all cylinders for me, I felt like that would have just elevated my enjoyment for it. So, yeah. Again, my final thought, it's not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination, okay? I have seen worse horror movies, at least this one. You can follow, the narrative is solid with a few plot holes here and there that, or just maybe not even plot holes, plot inconsistencies where you're just like, just say something or do something, or why are you doing this? And just little things that frustrate you. But again, I've seen worse, much, much worse.
Yeah.
So it's fine for what it is. Would I revisit it? Maybe. If somebody was watching it, I wouldn't say, oh God, I'm not going to watch this movie. If my kid actually wanted to watch it, I would show it to her. I just don't know if I would actively go out of my way to watch it again unless there was some reason to.
Now, let me ask you this. If you were to, let's say you got off here, off the podcast with me, and you found a couple like YouTube videos, you explored the lore of it a little bit more. Would you be more interested in revisiting it after maybe seeing some of the lore a little bit more?
If it would give me some context to understand certain things, absolutely. That way I could kind of watch it and be like, okay, so now I'm understanding what's going on here a little bit more. And maybe give me a fresh perspective on the matter.
Yeah. See, that's what I was honestly thinking about doing that, looking up a couple videos, getting a little bit more context to the backstory of everything, and then maybe coming back to it and revisiting it. That way maybe I could look at things a little bit differently. And I'm kind of with you, and I enjoyed it for what it was. I think it's a pretty solid film. It's not a perfect film, but then again, there's not a ton of horror movies coming out lately that are hitting all cylinders for me.
Yeah.
So I think all the performances were solid. And if they make a sequel, I'll be down for it. I'll give the sequel a watch. Mm-hmm. I definitely think this would make a good franchise. I personally think too, if they would want to maybe do something a little different with it, maybe explore some other stories. They could even do a series that takes place between the movies if they wanted to.
Sure.
And maybe the series could be a little bit more graphic.
Maybe.
As it were. But I think it was solid all the way around. And I don't know if you saw the mid-credit scene, but that was a running joke in the movie that I really liked.
Maybe I didn't. What was it?
So in the movie, when Mike opens that locker and there's that little figure in it with the like O face, and it scares him,
mm-hmm.
and then he goes back again and it's in the one closet and it scares him.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the scene in the movie with the taxi where Freddy gets in the taxi and the taxi driver's like, why do I always get the weirdos?
Yeah.
There's a mid-credit scene where the taxi guy is like resting and somebody's like knocking on the cab door and he's like, taking my break, don't bother me. And then the door opens and the door closes and he like lifts his hat, or I think he's got like cover on his eyes. He lifts it and that little figurine's sitting in the passenger side and it scares the shit out of him. It's just a little fun joke, but I thought it was funny for what it was. If you get the chance to like watch that little snippet with it being a running joke, I thought it was funny. So
well, I even kind of skimmed through the credits for a minute and I didn't see it. Apparently I ran right over it. Huh.
If you blink, you miss it.
Clearly.
To be honest.
All right.
But any other thoughts on Five Nights at Freddy's?
No, like I said, if you've got a little time to kill, it's not a bad time waster. If you just want to give it a watch, it's not gonna ruin your day or anything like that. So.
Solid. I will say one thing. This this is sort of related to Five Nights at Freddy's, just because of Matthew Lillard. I'd have to look up what the project is, but there is a project in development that is going to have Matthew Lillard and Heather Langenkamp in it.
Ooh, I feel like I read about that.
So, I think it's Mike Flanagan.
Yeah. I think I shared that on our Facebook page.
And I am completely down for that.
Sure.
So, but I don't have any other thoughts on Five Nights at Freddy's. I think if people want to watch it, I think it's worth visiting at least once.
Mm-hmm.
If you get curious after watching it, explore the lore, watch it again. I don't like the fact that it's kind of getting shit on by the critics when it's not that bad of a movie, guys. It's actually it's a decent movie for what it is.
It's not. Yeah, like I said, I've seen worse.
And Matthew Lillard is definitely one of the highlights for me.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Hutcherson, he's pretty good in this film, so I'll give it that. So I don't have anything. If you don't have anything, you can tell all those wonderful people where to find us.
All right. Well, Ramblers, let us know what you thought about Five Nights at Freddy's. You can do that on X or whatever social media platform that you so choose that we may be on. If you got more to say and a tweet's just not going to cover it, send us an email at horrorramblings@gmail.com. Come discuss horror with like-minded individuals on our Facebook group or in our Ramblers room on Discord. You can even find us on Instagram, where we try to post up horror images or whatever. And if you're feeling generous, want to support the show, you can head on over to patreon.com/pencil and paper productions. Help the show grow by leaving a review on your favorite podcasting app. 5 stars would do the trick if you would be so kind. And tell your friends to find us on their favorite podcasting platform as well. If you happen to be using Spotify, take a look to see if we've posted up any questions and polls. Let us know what you think. Finally, if you need a central hub, pencilpaperproductions.com/horror-ramblings. The links are in the show notes down below.
And remember, guys, stay spooky out there.
This has been the Horror Ramblings podcast. Join us next time for even more.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.